Today we're going to learn about an extraordinary and moving story that promises to change the way we view spirituality. Rowena Callaway went through a near-death experience that led her to a shocking revelation about Jesus and the true meaning of faith. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more inspiring stories like this one. Get ready for an amazing journey. I never imagined I would be here telling this story. You know, when you're absolutely sure about something and then, in the blink of an eye, everything you believed in completely changes. That's exactly what happened to me. My name is Rowena Callaway. I'm 39 years old and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a beautiful city, one of those that seems to have stopped in time, with its tree-lined streets and historic houses. I've lived here since I was born, and it's here that I'm raising my daughter, Savannah, the reason I live. Mom, why do you always say I'm the reason you live? Savannah asked me the other day, in that curious way that only children have. I smiled and replied, "Because you taught me what true love is, darling." Before everything happened, I was what people would call an ordinary person. I woke up early, prepared breakfast, took Savannah to school, went to work, came home, helped with homework, that routine that every mother knows well. My apartment isn't much. 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room with a beat-up sofa that has seen better days but is still a favorite place for our Friday movie sessions. "Rowena, you've always been so down-to-earth," my sister used to say, and it was true. I've never been one to believe in supernatural things or mystical experiences. I went to church from time to time, more out of family tradition than conviction. I remember my mother saying, "One day, you will understand that there is more to this life than meets the eye." I just smiled and changed the subject. In the office where I work as an administrative assistant, I'm known as the hands-on one. Sarah, my coworker for over 10 years, always jokes, "If you want something resolved, ask Rowena. She doesn't waste time with fantasies." But life has an interesting way of surprising us, doesn't it? Here I am, the same practical and down-to-earth Rowena, about to tell you something that defies everything I believed possible. I am not a writer, nor a speaker, nor a spiritual leader. I'm just a mom who went through something extraordinary and felt the need to share. Why did you decide to tell your story now? Many ask me. The answer is simple: because some experiences are too great to keep to ourselves. They need to be shared, not to convince anyone of anything, but to show that there are mysteries in this life that our rational mind cannot explain. It was an ordinary Tuesday in January when I noticed the first signs. I remember it perfectly, because it was the day Savannah had a performance at school. I was getting ready to go out when I felt that first twinge in my stomach. At the time, I didn't pay much attention. "Mom, are you okay?" Savannah asked, her wide eyes full of concern as she saw me leaning against the kitchen sink. "Of course, honey. Just a little pain from nothing. Come on, you can't be late for your presentation." But it wasn't just a little pain from anything. Over the next few weeks, fatigue began to become my constant companion. It was a different kind of tiredness, something no amount of coffee could fix. At work, Sarah began to notice, "Rowena, you're paler than usual. Are you sure everything's okay?" "It's just a phase," I replied, trying to convince myself more than others. The night started to get longer. I, who always had the energy to help Savannah with her homework, now could barely keep my eyes open after dinner. One night, while we were trying to solve math problems, I fell asleep mid-explanation. "Aunt Mary," I heard Savannah on the phone with my sister. "Mommy is sleeping a lot. She's never slept like this before." The pain became more frequent, more intense. I started keeping a mental diary. Monday, 3 episodes of intense pain. Tuesday, I barely managed to eat lunch. Wednesday, I had to leave work early. My mother, with that sixth sense that only mothers have, started to appear at home more often. "You're not well, daughter," she said, placing her hand on my forehead like she did when I was a child. "You need to go to the doctor." But there was always an excuse. "I'll make an appointment tomorrow. It's just stress. It'll pass." Until that fateful Sunday, I had just put Savannah to sleep when I passed out in the hallway. The noise must have woken up my mother, who was spending the weekend with us. "He arrives," she declared, helping me up. "I'm going to take you to the doctor tomorrow, even if I have to drag you." That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling of my room, I felt real fear for the first time. It was no longer possible to ignore that something was very wrong. The doctor's office had that typical hospital smell. a mix of disinfectant and something I could never quite identify. Sitting in the waiting room, I watched people come and go, each with their own story, their concerns. "Mrs. Calloway," the nurse called, her gentle face contrasting with the seriousness of her tone. The first exam seemed routine. Pressure, temperature, some basic questions. Then came the battery of more specific exams. With each new result, I saw Dr. Thompson's expression become more serious. "Rowena," he said, adjusting his glasses in what I had already learned was a sign of bad news. "We need to do some more specific tests." 1 week turned into 2. Each new specialist brought more questions than answers. Until that Thursday afternoon, Dr. Thompson sat behind his desk, a thick folder of my exams in front of him. "Sit down, please," he said, indicating the chair. My mother held my hand tightly. "The tests indicate advanced stage colon cancer." The world seemed to stop. The words echoed in my head as if they were being spoken in slow motion. Cancer, advanced. But what about Savannah? Was the first thing I managed to say, my voice shaking. "Let's fight, daughter," my mother whispered, squeezing my hand even tighter. The doctor continued talking about treatments, options, procedures. He mentioned a surgery called a colectomy. He talked about chances and statistics, deadlines, but all I could think about was Savannah. That night, after putting my daughter to bed, I sat on the porch with my sister Mary. "How am I going to tell her, Mary?" I asked, tears finally falling. "You don't need to tell me everything now," she replied, hugging me. "Let's take it one day at a time." Financial worries also began to take their toll. Insurance would cover some of it, but there was still a mountain of expenses ahead. "Don't worry about it now," my mother said, when she saw me doing math at the kitchen table. "We'll find a way. Family is for these times." The news spread quickly. Sarah organized a fundraiser at the office. Neighbors offered to help with Savannah. It was as if an army of angels had suddenly appeared around me. One night, while we were watching TV together, Savannah surprised me. "Mom, I know you're sick," she said, her eyes fixed on mine. "But you're strong. You'll be fine." I swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears. "How do you know I'm sick, honey?" "I heard you talking to Aunt Mary. I wasn't eavesdropping, I swear, but you don't have to hide it from me. I'm big now." At that moment, I hugged my daughter and cried. I cried for his early maturity, for his unconditional love, for all the fear I was feeling. "Promise you'll fight, Mom?" she asked, her voice small against my chest. "I promise, my love. I promise with all my strength." The morning of the surgery dawned with a fine fog covering Charleston. I woke up before the alarm clock. In fact, I had barely slept. I spent much of the night watching Savannah sleep on the mattress we had placed next to my bed. "I couldn't sleep either," my mother asked, appearing at the bedroom door with 2 cups of tea. "How could I?" I replied, accepting the hot cup. "Mom, if something happens—" "Shh," she interrupted me. "Nothing's going to happen. You're going to go into that operating room and you're going to come out even stronger." The hospital was quiet when we arrived, just the muffled sound of footsteps and distant voices. Nurse Julie, a lady with gray hair and a kind smile, came to prepare me. "Nervous, darling?" she asked as she checked my vitals. "Scared to death," I confessed. "It's normal, but you're in good hands. Dr. Thompson is the best." Savannah was sitting in a chair in the corner of the room, drawing on a pad she had brought from home. Every now and then, he would look up to look at me, as if to make sure I was still there. "Come here, my love," I called. She came running, climbed onto the hospital bed and hugged me tightly. "You'll be back soon, right?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Faster than you think. And when I get back, let's make that chocolate cake you like so much, okay?" She nodded, trying to smile through the tears that were beginning to form. Dr. Thompson showed up for one last chat before surgery. He explained the procedure again, the risks, the estimated time. I tried to pay attention, but my thoughts were scattered. "It's time," Nurse Julie announced softly. The goodbye hugs were quick. My mother, Mary, Savannah. As they took me to the operating room, I could still hear Savannah's voice. "I love you, Mom." The operating room was colder than I imagined. The lights were bright, and there was a constant hum of equipment. The medical team moved efficiently, each in their role. "Let's start the anesthesia now," I heard someone say. I closed my eyes and started to pray. Not a formal prayer, just a sincere request from the bottom of my heart. "Please let me return to my daughter. The last thing I remember was the metallic taste of the oxygen mask and the rhythmic sound of the heart monitor. It was like waking up from a dream, but unlike any awakening I've ever experienced. One moment I was feeling the effect of the anesthesia, the next I was completely conscious. But something was different, very different. The first thing I noticed was the clarity. It was as if he had spent his entire life looking through a fogged glass and suddenly someone had cleaned it. Every detail was sharp. Every sound was crystal clear. Pressure stable, I heard one of the doctors say, and that's when it hit me. I could see the entire operating room, but from an impossible angle. He was watching everything from above, close to the ceiling. I saw my own body lying on the operating table, motionless, connected to various devices. The medical team worked with precision. Dr. Thompson focused, Nurse Julie passing instruments, the anesthesiologist monitoring the equipment. It was surreal, like watching a movie in ultra-high definition, but I was one of the characters. The most extraordinary thing was the absence of fear. I should be scared, right? After all, I was literally outside my body. But instead, I felt a deep peace, a tranquility I had never experienced before. I tried to communicate with the medical team. Hey, I'm up here. But no one reacted. My voice, if I could call it that, made no sound. It was more like a thought that echoed in space. I observed my body curiously. It was strange to see myself that way, as if I were looking at a three-dimensional photograph. I noticed small details that I had never noticed before. A small scar near my elbow, from when I fell off my bicycle when I was 12. The necklace Savannah had given me last Christmas, now carefully removed and stored with my belongings. Onyx saturation dropping a little, said the anesthesiologist, adjusting something on the equipment. I wanted to get closer to get a better look, and instantly, I was closer. There was no physical movement. It was as if all you had to do was think to be somewhere else in the room. Fascinating. I also noticed that I could feel the emotions of the people in the room. It wasn't like reading minds. It was more subtle. I could see Doctor's intense concentration. Thompson, Nurse Julie's veiled concern, the anesthetist's meticulous attention. That's when I noticed something even more extraordinary. I could see a kind of subtle energy around each person, like a delicate aura, soft colors that seemed to pulse and change with your thoughts and emotions. It's amazing how everything seems to make sense now, I thought. Every breath, every heartbeat monitored by the machines, every movement of the surgical team, it all felt like part of a perfectly choreographed dance. The weather felt different too. I couldn't tell if minutes or hours had passed. It was as if I were in a space where time didn't exist in the same way we know it. I remember thinking, so this is what happens when we die. But I soon realized that I wasn't dead. It was something different, as if I were in an intermediate state between two worlds. Everything under control, I heard Dr. Thompson say, his voice calm and professional. And it was, but not just the surgery. For the first time in my life, I felt like everything, absolutely everything, was exactly as it should be. Suddenly, the operating room began to feel distant, as if it was being gently pulled back by an invisible force. There was no fear. There was no resistance. It was like a part of me knew exactly what was happening. The hospital environment gradually disappeared, giving way to something I can only describe as an infinite void. But it wasn't a scary or lonely void. It was a space filled with a white, soft, welcoming light. It's like being surrounded by liquid love, I thought at the time. And even today, that remains the best description I can give. The light didn't come from any specific place. It was simply everywhere, part of everything. In this space, I began to realize that my shape was different. I no longer had a body as we know it. It was more like a floating consciousness. I could move it with just thought, although movement isn't quite the right word. It was more like changing the focus of my attention. That's when I started hearing a song. Not with his ears, of course, since he no longer had physical ears. But it was a vibration that permeated that entire space. It was the most beautiful music I've ever heard. A perfect harmony that seemed to contain all the music in the world at once. This is peace, I realized. It wasn't an ordinary thought. It was more like a deep understanding that came from every particle of my being. All worry, all fear, all anxiety. It was all gone. The light began to become more intense, but without ever becoming blinding. It was as if she were alive, pulsing with an intelligence of her own. I began to feel a love so deep, so unconditional, that it made me realize that I had never really understood what love was before. Welcome, I heard, felt a communication that was not made of words, but of pure understanding. There was no specific voice. It was as if the light itself was communicating with me. At that moment, I had a clear understanding that I was experiencing something beyond life and death. It was a completely different state of existence, where the rules of the physical world did not apply. Time didn't exist there. It could have stayed in that state for seconds or for centuries. There was no difference. Each moment was filled with an eternity of experiences and understandings. In the midst of that infinite light and peace, a crystal-clear thought appeared in my consciousness. Savannah. It was as if the love for my daughter created an instant bridge between that dimension of light and the physical world. In the blink of an eye, if she still had eyes in that state, I found myself inside her classroom. He wasn't there physically, of course, but he could see and feel everything with stunning clarity. The room had that distinctive smell of chalk and freshly sharpened pencils. The walls were decorated with colorful children's drawings, and sunlight streamed softly through the tall windows. Savannah was sitting at her usual desk, third in the second row. She wore her navy blue uniform and had her hair tied in 2 braids, exactly as I had done that morning. She was concentrating on her drawing, her tongue slightly out, in a gesture she always made when she was focused on something. I could see every detail of his face with surprising clarity, every freckle, every tiny scar, even that little birthmark behind her right ear that only a mother would know about. But more than seeing, I could feel his emotions. I hope Mom likes my drawing. I heard her thoughts as clearly as if they were words spoken out loud. She was drawing our house rewiring with the 2 of us holding hands in the front yard. That's when it happened. Savannah was pointing out her favorite colored pencil, the blue one she used to draw the sky in all her drawings. Because she was distracted, thinking about me, the sharpener slipped and cut her finger. "There," she exclaimed softly, a small drop of blood welling up from the cut. My maternal instinct was instantaneous. I tried to reach her, to comfort her, but my own hands went through her physical form. It was like trying to embrace the wind. The frustration I felt at that moment was overwhelming. "Is everything okay, Savannah?" Professor Thompson asked, approaching her desk. "Yes, Mrs. Thompson," my little one replied, brave as ever. "Just a little cut." The teacher gave her a Band-Aid with unicorn prints on it, and Savannah smiled, even though her eyes were still teary. While the teacher applied the bandage, I could hear my daughter's thoughts again. "Mommy always kisses my wounds to make them heal faster." That broke my heart. The impossibility of touching her, of comforting her, even if it was just a small cut, awakened in me an overwhelming urgency to return. That entire state of peace and transcendence was momentarily replaced by a single thought. I needed to return to my daughter. I can't leave her, I thought with all the strength of my being. She still needs me. I watched as she put away the sharpener and picked up another pencil, returning to her drawing. Even with her injured finger, she remained determined to finish her work of art. Your resilience, even in something so small, filled me with pride and love. "You are stronger than you know, my love," I wanted to tell her. And although he couldn't hear me, I saw a small smile appear on his lips, as if he had somehow sensed my presence. At that moment, I understood that love transcends physical barriers. Even though we couldn't touch her or talk to her, our bond was something that not even death could break. It was a connection that went beyond the body, beyond matter, beyond life itself. While I was still processing the emotion of meeting Savannah, I felt a change in the environment around me. The light, which was already extraordinary, began to intensify in a different way. It wasn't just light, it was pure consciousness, love in its most absolute form. It was then that I realized I was no longer alone. I cannot describe exactly how I saw the presences that manifested themselves. They were not physical forms as we know them, but consciousnesses so vast and deep that they made my own existence seem like a grain of sand in front of the ocean. The presence I recognized as Jesus looked nothing like the images we see in churches or books. It was an energy of love so pure, so complete, that it made me understand for the first time the true meaning of the word divine. When this presence addressed me, it was not through spoken words, but direct communication from consciousness to consciousness. "You have a lot of questions." I felt more than heard. It wasn't a male or female voice. It was pure understanding flowing directly into my consciousness. "Why am I here?" I asked, without using words. The answer came in the form of expanded understanding, as if thousands of libraries of knowledge had been opened at once in my mind. I saw how everything was connected, every life, every choice, every moment. I saw that there were no coincidences, just an intricate fabric of interconnected purposes. Much of what they taught about me has been distorted over time, the presence communicated. And then, like a movie on high speed, I saw 2,000 years of history unfolding. I saw how simple messages of love and compassion were transformed into instruments of power and control. The true path has never been about rules or rituals, the presence continued. It's always been about love, just love. At that moment, I understood that religion and spirituality were completely different things. I saw that what we call God was something much greater, much more encompassing than any human definition could capture. The presence showed me what it called the Holy Grail. It was not a physical chalice, as the legends tell it, but a fundamental truth about the nature of existence, that we are all part of the same consciousness, temporarily divided into individual experiences to grow and learn. But what about death? I asked, remembering my body on the operating table. The answer came with crystal clarity. There is no death, only transformation. I saw that what we call death is just a change of state, like water turning to vapor. The essence remains the same. Your mission is not over yet. I felt the presence communicate. You have more to learn and more to teach. Tears that weren't physical ran through my being. It was as if each truth revealed was a drop of crystal clear water washing away years of doubts and fears. What should I do then? I asked. Live with love, was the simple answer. Not love as a concept, but as an action. Every small act of kindness creates waves of transformation that you can't even imagine. Then I saw how each gesture of love, a hug from Savannah, a smile to a stranger, a word of comfort, created ripples of light that expanded across the universe, affecting realities beyond our normal understanding. And when I return, how can I maintain this understanding? You don't have to keep everything, the presence replied with infinite kindness. Just remember the essentials. You are loved, you are never alone, and everything, absolutely everything, has a greater purpose. After that profound encounter with the divine presence, the environment around me began to change again. The intense light gave way to a scene that, even though it was clearly not earthly, had familiar elements. I found myself in a garden that defied earthly description. The flowers there weren't just flowers, they were like music transformed into shape and color. Each petal seemed to emit its own light, and the colors, oh, the colors. Imagine a rainbow multiplied by 1,000, with shades we didn't even know existed. The air, if I can call it that, was perfumed with fragrances that reminded me of all the happy moments of my life at the same time. That's when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in over 2 decades. Welcome to our garden, dear. I turned, or rather, my consciousness turned, and there they were, Grandpa Henry and Grandma Ethel Calloway, but not as I saw them in their last days, weakened by age and illness. They were radiant, young, exactly like in the old photographs that I keep so fondly. Grandpa, Grandma, my emotion was palpable, even in that non-physical form. Grandpa Henry smiled in that mischievous way I loved so much as a child. His blue eyes shone with a light that seemed to come from within. Who else would it be, Popcorn? He said, using the nickname only he gave me. Grandma Ethel came closer, and even though we didn't have physical bodies, I somehow managed to feel her embrace, that embrace that smelled of freshly baked cookies and unconditional love. You've grown so much, my girl, she said, her voice just as I remembered it, with that soft southern drawl that made every word sound like music. But how are you here? How can you be so young? Grandpa Henry laughed, that hearty laugh that made his eyes close in little wrinkles of joy. Here, darling, we are as we really are, not as time has made us seem. We walked, or floated, or simply existed, around the garden while talking. Every flower, every leaf seemed to react to our presence, as if everything there was conscious and alive in a way that we cannot understand on Earth. Savannah looks so much like you did when she was little, Grandma Ethel commented, surprising me. Do you know Savannah? Oh, honey, Grandma smiled. We never stopped being around. We were there when she was born, when she took her first steps, when she started school. Especially the nights you lay awake, worrying about whether you were being a good mother, Grandpa added. We so wanted to be able to tell you what a wonderful job you were doing. The tears, or whatever they were in that form, flowed freely now. Miss you so much. But we never really left, Popcorn, Grandpa said, using that tone of voice he always used when he wanted to teach me something important. Love knows no distance, it knows no time, it knows no death. Grandma Ethel picked up something that looked like a flower, but a flower that looked like it was made of pure light. Look at this flower, darling. It never really dies. It just changes shape, like us, like you one day. But it's not your time yet, Grandpa said, his face becoming more serious. You still have a lot to live for. Savannah needs you. But what if I'm not strong enough? What if cancer? Shh, Grandma interrupted me gently. You're stronger than you know. You always have been. Remember when you were 7 years old and you fell from that tree? Everyone thought you wouldn't climb back up. But the next day, there I was on the same branch, I added, laughing through my tears. Exactly, Grandpa smiled. You've always had this strength inside you, and now you have even more reason to fight. We stayed there, in that heavenly garden, sharing memories, love and wisdom. They told me about life after life, about how love goes on, about how nothing really ends. It just transforms. It's time, honey, Grandma finally said, her voice soft but firm. I don't want to go, I confessed, feeling that same anguish as when I was a child and had to leave their house. We don't want you to go either, Grandpa said, but we have to. And remember, we will always be with you, in the rays of the morning sun, in the scent of the flowers, in Savannah's smile. The return was gradual, like waking up from a deep dream. First, there were the sounds, the rhythmic beeping of heart monitors, muffled voices, the soft hum of equipment. Then the physical sensations began to return, the heaviness of my body, the tingling in my limbs, my throat becoming dry from the breathing tube. She's coming back, I heard Nurse Julie's voice, now seeming to come from far away. The first thing I felt was an enormous weight, not physical, but the density of being back in the material body. It was like putting on a wet, heavy coat after floating freely. Everything seemed denser, more limited. I opened my eyes slowly, the fluorescent light of the hospital feeling strangely artificial after the divine light I had experienced. Dr. Thompson's face appeared in my field of vision. Welcome back, Rowena, he said, smiling behind his surgical mask. The surgery was a success. I tried to speak, but the breathing tube was still in my throat. Nurse Julie noticed my uneasiness. Calm down, sweetheart. We'll remove the tube soon. For now, just rest. The following hours were a mix of sleep and wakefulness. When they finally moved me to the recovery room, my mother was there, her eyes red from crying. My daughter, she whispered, holding my hand. I managed a weak smile. Savannah was the first word I could say after they removed the tube. She's at school. Mary will bring her later. I closed my eyes, remembering the cut on my finger that I had witnessed during my experience. A few hours later, when Savannah walked into the hospital room, the first thing I noticed was the unicorn Band-Aid on her finger. Mommy! She ran to hug me, stopping at the last moment, remembering that she needed to be gentle. What happened to your finger, honey? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I cut myself at school today with a sharpener, she replied, showing the bandage. But Professor Thompson gave me this cool Band-Aid. My mother must have noticed my expression, because she asked, What's wrong, daughter? I'll tell you later, I replied, blinking back tears. The following days were of physical recovery, but also of deep reflection. How do I explain to people what I had experienced? How can you put something so transcendental into earthly words? A week later, at home, Savannah was helping me organize some old photos when we found a photograph of my grandparents. Who are they, Mom? These are your great-grandparents, Henry and Ethel, I replied, touching the photo fondly. Did you know your great-grandfather called me Popcorn? Why? Because I was little, and I was always jumping from one side to another. I smiled, remembering the heavenly garden where I had found them. Recovery was faster than doctors expected. Dr. Thompson even used the word miraculous in one of the follow-up appointments. But the real miracle wasn't the physical recovery. It was the inner transformation that had taken place. Every morning now has a different flavor. When I wake up and see the sun streaming through the window, I remember the divine light I experienced. When I hug Savannah, I feel that unconditional love that I noticed on the other side. When I see flowers in the garden, I remember the heavenly garden where I found my grandparents. I didn't found any religious group. I didn't write books. I don't give talks. I continue to live my life normally. I work, take care of the house, help Savannah with her schoolwork, but there is a fundamental difference. Now I know, with a certainty that goes beyond faith, that there is something more, that death is not the end, that love transcends all barriers. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the garden at home, I feel that same peace that I experienced on the other side. And in moments like these, I can almost hear Grandpa Henry's laugh, feel Grandma Ethel's hug, feel that divine presence that showed me the true meaning of love. Mom, Savannah asked me the other day, "Why do you always smile when you look at the sky?" I hugged my daughter and simply replied, "Because now I know that we are never truly alone, my love. Never." And so I continue my life, carrying with me a truth that changed everything. No matter what happens, love is the only reality that truly matters. Everything else is just a passage, a transformation, a learning experience in the great mystery we call life.